So this is kind of a weird month for reading. It was a month of questioning, mediocrity, and just overall bad writing. Hello all my otaku friends, my name is Profitaku, and welcome back to my channel for my June manga reading log. I read a wide variety of things this month, 69 volumes total, and there's definitely some things to put on your radar, so stay tuned. Now, before we get started with this reading log, as always, no spoilers. I will never tell you what specifically happens in a volume. If it's a new series, I just want to tell you some general characteristics about it. If it's an ongoing series, do I like the direction that it's going in? And if it's an end to a series, did the ending land? This first section here is going to be all the things that I dropped this month. There are several series that got the axe, and I just need to put these on your radar of things to avoid. First up from Viz Media, from the Shonen Jump line, we have Mission Yozakura Family. I read volumes 3 and 4. I just picked up volume 5. I do plan on reading that, but then I plan to switch over to digital only. Now here's my problem with Mission Yozakura Family. It's a good series. I thoroughly enjoy it. I guess my problem is that the story just doesn't grip me enough to keep going with it. I think the series really gravitates too much towards the tropes for my personal taste, specifically with the sister-brother complex, and is definitely sitting more on the comedy side of Shonen Jump than the dark, gritty action side of Shonen Jump, and I just don't think this had a very good balancing act between the two, unlike Sakamoto Days, which does it perfectly in my personal opinion, which is why I've decided to keep going with Sakamoto Days, but go ahead and get rid of this one. Next up here from Seven Seas, we have The Invisible Man and His Soon-to-Be Wife. This is from the same mangaka as The Country Without Humans. Now, I thoroughly enjoy The Country Without Humans, so I had very high expectations for this, but this just fell flat for me from a storytelling perspective. The shtick is interesting enough with a blind girl and an invisible man, and they start a relationship together in an office setting, but I don't know, I think that the story just didn't grip me. The pacing felt very much off. It was really slow at the beginning, and it was getting so boring that I ended up falling asleep. I took a nap, I woke up, I read the rest of the volume, and I got better after I woke up from the nap, but it still wasn't good enough for me to keep it in my collection. Also from Seven Seas, we have volume 4 of the Iden Deities Know Only Peace. I thoroughly enjoyed the first couple volumes, but here we are into volume 4. It took so long for volume 4 to release, and when I read this with a fresh set of eyes, I had no investment in the characters or the story, and with that in mind, that's just the big nail in the coffin for me when it comes to reading a series. I had said in previous reading logs that there's many different layers to this story, but as we continue through the volumes, the info dumping just became crazy, and it really took you away from the story, and it's really hard for me to get invested in a story when it's just impossible to follow. The next series that I let go from Yen Press, we have Chain Soldier. I read volumes 3 and 4 this month. I think for an ecchi series, it's actually really good. The action works really well, the premise is interesting, they use the etchiness in a really unique and interesting way. But with that being said, it was a series that after I read volume 4, I was like, you know what, I don't see myself really enjoying this series going forward. I have no investment in the story or the characters, and it's definitely one I'm not going to reread in the future. And the last series that I dropped this month is I'm Quitting Heroing. I read volume 2, and man, it was just as bad as volume 1. It was just so boring. The characters and the story are just absolutely forgettable. There's no progression to the actual story through 2 volumes, which kind of blew my mind. And it also tried to be super philosophical, trying to like put these life lessons in there, when I really just didn't care about that. I just wanted there to be some sort of like investment into the actual storyline. Alright, enough negativity. We're moving on to the completed series that I had this month. 2 amazing series from Viz Media. First up is My Love Story. I read volumes 9 to 13. This was a 2-month adventure, and it was such a great adventure at that. Now, I'll be totally honest with you, I thought that the writing in the second half of the story was not nearly as good as their previous series High School Debut, but with that being said, I thought the last arc was perfect. It was a great conclusion to the series, perfect encapsulation of what the series was about. Every character got a great wrap up. It was super funny, super wholesome, and I cannot recommend this series enough. The other series that I completed this month was Daytime Shooting Star. I read volumes 7 to 12, and there was definitely some issues with the writing of the story. I gave it a 7.75 from an objective standpoint. There were some issues with the way some of the character arcs were wrapped up, and also some of the balance between the characters in the story. There were some characters that I thought needed more limelight than others to help kind of balance this story out and to help it feel a little bit more conclusive, but it is what it is. From a subjective standpoint, I gave it a 9.2 out of 10. It was a fantastic ride, great pacing, so much drama. I absolutely loved the cast of characters, and it gave me that beautiful shoujo warm and fuzzy feeling, so I am very excited to have this in my collection, and it's one that I plan to reread in the future. And I also will say that there was a couple arcs in here that definitely were a little bit corny and stereotypical. Not really what I was hoping to see, but that was the direction they chose and I just have to accept it. This next section are all the ongoing series that I am reading from Viz Media. First up, we have volumes 7 and 8 of Sakamoto Days. What I love about Sakamoto Days and what I had said previously in this video was the balance between the comedy and the seriousness, and I also appreciate the storytelling. You know, battle shonen can be considered very stereotypical, but I love the direction of all these arcs. They're super unique, they all have their little niche to them, and it's explained very well. The introduction of new characters is done flawlessly. You always find traits that you really enjoy about them, and all the different powers just work so well together. I'm very shocked that Sakamoto Days is writing an 8 on my anime list. I think it easily should be like an 8.2, 8.3. Next up here is a shoujo series. We have My Special One Volume 2, and there's definitely been some complaints on the internet about this series, and I actually understand why. One of the biggest things that I don't like about manga is the trope woe is me, and this has this written all over it in the second volume. The pacing in this volume is just way too fast, and it has the problem being wishy-washy with the characters, which is just something I don't enjoy reading. I was also telling somebody else this, but the whole shtick of the manga presented in volume 1 is basically over. And I have no idea the direction that the series is going to go from here, but you'll understand if you read the first 2 volumes. You'll be like, wait, I don't understand what the story is actually about anymore. I'm going to continue on because I am actually curious to see where this goes, but I encourage you to read it as well to see if you have the same opinions as I do. Next up here, we have Spy Family Volume 9, and look, I had a lot of bad things to say about Volume 8. I'm glad that that arc finally got wrapped up here at the beginning of Volume 9, and now we're back to Spy Family being Spy Family, the main thing being the main thing. Thank goodness, because I was really scared this was one I was gonna drop. And last up for the ongoing series, I read volumes 7 and 8 of Alice in Borderland, and oh my goodness, this series is amazing. This omnibus finishes a major arc in the series, and then it takes the whole series and flips it on its head. It puts a new twist in there, but it's a mix between the old Alice in Borderland and the new Alice in Borderland. And I love the direction that this series is taking. It is super unique, super interesting, a total page turner, and I am totally invested in this story. I cannot wait to read the next 2 omnibuses. Now, I only read one new series from Viz Media this month, and that is Boys Abyss. I read volume 1 physically, and because I loved it so much, I read the next 4 volumes digitally, so I read volumes 1 to 5 this month. The story follows a boy who lives in the countryside who's in a really bad family situation, and his life is just bleak and depressing. He thinks that there's no escape from his life, and he's just trying to not spiral into this dark abyss. The story is like a bad accident on the freeway. You know you should be paying attention and moving forward, but you just have to look to see how grotesque it actually is. This story is a very introspective manga. It shows that people just put a facade. They may be okay on the outside, but on the inside, there's definitely some demons going on. The direction of our main character definitely seems to go around in circles sometimes, seems a little bit wishy-washy, but with that being said, I thoroughly enjoy the ride, as messy as it is, and I cannot wait to keep reading this series. Let's move on to Kodansha. I did finish one series this month from them, and that is number 6. I read volumes 4 to 9. This is a boys love sci-fi dystopian series following this boy who lives in this utopia, but there's definitely something going on, this mystery of people dying, and it's up to him to solve this mystery. I had said in a previous reading log that Omnibus 1, so volumes 1 to 3, was a setup volume. They're kind of just setting up the world, and then we get to the second omnibus starting with volume 4, and it was still slow. But finally after that, we get some story progression, some crazy action. It went from 0 to 100 super fast. Then it was just a barrel roll towards the finish. Fast action, quick pacing, lots of big reveals, but there was definitely an issue with the storytelling. There were several plot holes that just didn't get answered, and some characters that I really felt should have shined in this series did not get the spotlight that they deserved. Tons of potential and okay execution. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I did thoroughly enjoy it, but it wasn't something that I wanted to reread, thus I do not have it in my collection anymore. I went ahead and sold it off. Actually, another Kodansha / vertical series that I finished this month was Miss Miyazin Would Like to Get Closer to You Volume 4, a great wrap up to a really short and beautiful series. Highly recommended if you're just looking for something super sweet and wholesome. Great characters, great episodes, great pacing. Look, this isn't trying to just change the formula. It just does what it knows what it needs to do well. Moving on to the ongoing series from Kodansha this month, I read volumes 2 and 3 of A Condition Called Love. So what I will say about this series said it definitely needs a 3-volume rule because all of the concerns in volume 1 get answered in volume 2. It helps shell out the story, and then volume 3 just kind of puts everything together and gives us a more linear storyline. If you don't like it after these 3 volumes, then yeah, go ahead and drop it. Here we are with another rom-com series, Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro, volume 14. This was good, not great. It seems like at this point of the series, we just continue to get just general storyline without a lot of progression. There is progression, but I don't know, it's just missing that flair. I think this series needs to do something really impactful in the next couple volumes for me to really decide whether I want to keep this in my physical collection. Last up here from Kodansha Vertical, we have In the Clear Moonlit Dusk volume 4. A great volume, lots of great progression to the story, so this continues to be one of my favorite ongoing shoujos. Only one ongoing series from Square Enix, we have My Dress Up Darling volume 7, and look, here's my issue with it. Very similar to Nagatoro, seems like we're just in this cog right now. We keep doing the same old thing with not a lot of progression to the story. They keep trying to spin this series out. I just need some sort of progression. Moving on to 7 Seas here, we completed 1 series this month from them, and that is the Savior's Book Cafe story in Another World. A great final volume to an overall great series. This is just a very well-rounded beginner isekai story. You've got action, you've got romance, you've got slice of life, you have interesting characters, and you have a pretty interesting world. It wraps up all the different arcs pretty well here at the end. I wish one thing got shelled out just a hair bit more, but nonetheless, this was a great read, and I plan to keep this one in my collection. Tons of ongoing series from 7 Seas, first starting off with Yokohama Kodashi Kiko Volume 2, so this compiles volumes 4, 5, and 6 in the omnibus format. Every single chapter that I read from this manga, I just learn a little bit more about what it means to just slow down and take life one step at a time. Such an introspective manga. What do you want to get out of life? And following Alpha-san in this story in humanity's last moments is a perfect way to look at the world. A great series. Highly recommend this, because this is a series I did not think was going to get printed, and we should really cherish that we have this physically in English. Next up here is Tokyo Revengers volumes 9 and 10, and I know a lot of people were saying, you know, this series seems like it goes around in circles a lot, and yes, I definitely get that vibe, but at least in these last several volumes, I can definitely see some continual progression. It's like a massive puzzle piece. We're not trying to solve the puzzle all at one time, but with each arc, we get one corner of the puzzle that gets put together. This is one of those stories where I can say it's like 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back. 2 volumes of a shonen series from 7 Seas. We have Komono Jihen volumes 4 and 5. I absolutely love these 2 volumes. We get a great glimpse into some side characters. We get some introduction of new characters as well, and we also get a tiny bit of progression in the main storyline, but it was mainly about shelling out some of the backstories of some of our important side characters. It does it expertly well. I commend good writing when I see it. Great writing, really immersive, awesome powers, very thorough storylines. I cannot recommend this series enough. Last up for the ongoing series from 7 Seas, we have The Masterful Cat is Depressed Again Today, volume 6. It had been a long time between volumes 5 and 6, but we picked up right where we left off. Such a fun series, definitely in my top 15 manga of all time. Every single episode makes me laugh. I love the cat character. He's one of my top 10 characters of all time. I just cannot recommend this series enough. And we've got 4 new series from 7 Seas. First up, we have Yakuza Fiancé volumes 1 to 3, and now I am up to date with this series, and I thoroughly enjoyed this read. This is such a unique spin on a romance series. Yes, it does seem kind of stereotypical at the beginning. You have a forced arrangement, you have a really nice boy and a tsundere girl, and you're like, okay, this is gonna be stereotypical. But there's so many layers to this, and it's because of the Yakuza aspect to the story. There's obviously something really weird going on with him, and our main character is one of the most likable female MCs in manga. Super fun, super assertive, she can be super creepy at times too. This manga just has many different flavors, and I highly recommend it. Next up here is Superwoman in Love, Honey Trap, and Rapid Rabbit. This is a series that I picked up in my friend's Pick Out My Manga Haul shopping vlog, and this this was actually not terrible. I don't necessarily remember a lot of what happened in here, which obviously tells to like how memorable this could be. But what I do remember is that the actual superhero aspect of it is actually pretty cool. Some of the fights definitely seem stereotypical, but the Yuri romance is cute as well. I'm gonna give it one more volume, but it's definitely not one that I'm like dying to pick up at the moment. Now here's a series that's just a big middle finger. We have My Cute Little Kitten Volume 1, and you're like, oh, My Cute Little Kitten, that's adorable. And it's about these two girls who live together and they adopt a cat, and then they kind of start a family, and then there's like unrequited feelings and yada yada yada, romance, Yuri, blah blah blah. The issue with this series is that the cat right here just takes a backseat to everything. Honestly, the cat's like non-existent. From a Yuri standpoint, it is super cute. I like that they are both adults, so it's a little bit more of a mature romance. But yeah, I wanted this to be about a cat, and there is nothing about a cat. And last up for the new series from 7 Seas, we have My Girlfriend's Child Volume 1, and oh my goodness, let me say this about My Girlfriend's Child. It was such a great Volume 1 with the way that they respected the scenario of teen pregnancy. You just really feel for these characters in this first volume as they navigate this world of unknowns, and it's just so well written. I also love the way that they use the paneling. There's not a lot of text, lots of images, and they use the images to tell a story, and it's very well done. The art style is super unique, very minimalistic. So yes, this is a great read, and I cannot wait to read volume 2 of this thing. Moving on to the Yen Press titles. First, let's start with the ongoing stuff. I read The Boxer Volume 2, and I absolutely loved this volume. You know, with volume 1, it just seemed like it was all over the place, all these different characters coming into the story, and I was like, what is going on? But volume 2 kind of focuses everything into the main character. I love the progression of the storyline and what this whole boxing series is about. Now I understand where this story is trying to go, and I'm totally in for it. The other ongoing series that I read this month from Yen Press is Assorted Entanglements, and I wasn't really sure about volume 1, but then I found out this is an anthology of different relationships that are all loosely connected, and then I could buy into the series. I think the problem with the series is I was trying to find a connection and create this encompassing world, and because it's an anthology, it's not necessarily supposed to be like that. So if you're looking for a fun Yuri series with a bunch of different relationships, all with their own little twists and turns and great little personalities, and this is going to be the one for you. I thoroughly enjoyed this volume. Moving on to the new series that I tried. First up, we have A Business Proposal, and I thoroughly enjoyed this volume. You know, with manhwa, I find that the pacing is really slow. It keeps dragging on, but the pacing in this was perfect. Combine that with a really fun story of a girl who works for a company. She goes on a blind date, and the blind date is the CEO of her company, and he says he's going to marry the next person he dates. You get a lot of conundrums and a lot of hilarious situations. I am all in on this series. I think it is phenomenal. I think it's very well written, and I love the main characters. I cannot wait to see what this 10-volume series brings. Next up here, I have Reborn as a Vending Machine. I Now Wander the Dungeon. This is the manga adaptation. I'm going to save my thoughts on this because I'd love to do a YouTube short about the anime, manga, and light novel, so get ready for that one. A light novel series that I tried this month was the first volume of Magical Girl Raising Project, Magical Girl Hunger Games. It was gritty, it was intense, and I absolutely loved it. The writing style itself was interesting because, you know, a lot of times with light novels, I find that the inner dialogue is a little bit too much and the pacing is too slow in terms of the action. It was the opposite in this volume. There was a lot of action, but there wasn't a lot of internal dialogue, and I was missing that part. I think the world itself is really cool, but what I will say about the writing was that it didn't answer a lot of the questions I had to the latter half of the volume. So the first half, I was just asking myself questions a lot of the time. This is an all-encompassing first volume, so the next volume is going to bring something completely different, and I cannot wait to see where this series goes. Next up is Hi, I'm a Witch, and My Crush Wants to Make Me a Love Potion. I read volumes 1 and 2 this month, and what I will say about this is that it just seems kind of stereotypical. I wanted this to be super cute and fluffy. You got this witch who's making potions in the forest, a fantasy series. A lot of people compare this to the Savior's Book Cafe story in Another World, so I was very much intrigued, but I think it just fell flat in terms of the character dynamic. The male character MC really doesn't have anything going for him. He's nothing special. There's nothing that really makes me go, oh, he's really interesting. And the female main character is just really stereotypical. She's very sheltered. She's very secluded. She doesn't express her feelings very well, and all of that encompasses a very basic storyline in a fantasy setting. Do I recommend this series? No, I think that there's better stuff out there. I'm gonna give it one more volume to see where this goes. Next up is the complete omnibus collection volumes 1, 2, 3 of Pare Ranman. This is a racing series, and I absolutely enjoyed this read. It was a very solid 7.5 out of 10. This is what I could say as historical times steampunk times Mad Max times Wild West shootout. So if any of those topics intrigue you, definitely check this series out. The pacing in the first half of the volume is super slow. I will give that warning there. The first 5 chapters are just like a kind of a snooze fest, but then it really picks up, and then for the rest of the manga, it is balls to the wall craziness. Here we are with more of a darker series, The Essence of Being a Muse. This follows a girl who's been living a very sheltered life, oppressed from her mother. She kind of wants to turn a new leaf, follow her dreams of being a painter, and she sets off on her own. She has a lot of emotional trauma built up from her childhood, and this first volume is going through her in this new life. It is interesting, but I don't really necessarily like the direction the story is taking. There's too many paths going on, too many puzzle pieces. A couple of the puzzle pieces are providing kind of an unnecessary conflict in the storyline, so I'm very curious to see where they go with that, but it's not looking promising. I feel like this manga is trying to state a message about following your dreams, but then you have characters on the other side that are doing things in opposition to that, so this whole message is getting confuzzled, and this is all in the first volume. I am intrigued to see where this one goes. Another manhwa that we have here is Bloody Sweet, Volume 1. Following a high school girl who gets bullied, she's looking for her knight in shining armor, and it ends up being this vampire guy right here. Seems pretty stereotypical, and honestly, it kind of is in this first volume. It really wasn't anything special. You know what was ironic about the whole thing is that you've got this big cover here with the vampire in it, but I felt like the vampire was underutilized in my personal opinion. But on the other side, I will say I really enjoyed the female main character. I really like the setup that this volume brings to her, and I'm very curious to see how her storyline goes, and I am also curious to see how he integrates more into the story. Next up is one of the weirdest reads that I had this month, and that is Handyman Sato in Another World. This is the isekai series about a handyman getting reincarnated into another world, and what I will say about this is that there is no overarching story here. This is really a gag manga. It just plays on all the tropes of isekai manga, except it follows the handyman, so I don't know if I necessarily recommend this. I did find it pretty funny, to be honest with you, but because there's no overarching storyline, I don't know how much longer I can be invested in this series, and I have no idea what kind of direction this series is going to go in, so I am intrigued by it, but I can't necessarily recommend it. And last up from Yen Press, we have Dead Mount Death Play Volume 1. I did enjoy this volume. I think the premise of it is really cool, but I think the explanation of the world wasn't well done. So this is an isekai series, believe it or not, and it follows the corpse god, this skeleton monster thing who gets reincarnated into modern Japan as this boy, and he just wants to live a very peaceful life, but of course he's got all these powers. So you're in this new world and everything's going well, and then you get all these introduction of characters that aren't necessarily explained very well or set up, and it's up to you to kind of put the puzzle pieces of this story together and how this story is actually going to function. So I think that's where the downfall of this first volume was. With that being said, I thought everything else about it was pretty interesting, from the characters to the storyline, and where this series is going to go from here in terms of all the different paths that it could possibly take. Lots of potential here, so I am curious to see where this one goes in Volume 2. I also read 3 Saturday AM graphic novels this month. The first one was Underground, the second one was Titan King, and the third one was Oblivion Rouge. I don't plan on talking about those graphic novels in this video, but I will be doing a whole video reviewing all of the Saturday AM graphic novels in their collection. And that is it for my manga reading log for June. Let me know what you read down in the comments below if there's anything that I talked about that piques your interest. As always, if you enjoy the content of my videos, make sure you hit that like button, tap the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so that you know when more of my videos come out, and I will see you in the next one. Take care now. Bye-bye.